My name is Naomi Thurman. I was 32 years old when my son came into the world, 15 days ago, to be exact. He arrived after years of hoping, waiting, and praying for a life I believed would finally make sense. I had dreamed of this moment with the man I thought was my forever. Every ache, every sleepless night, every wave of nausea felt worth it the instant I heard my baby cry for the first time. My body was still stitched, sore, and exhausted beyond words. Sitting hurt, standing hurt, breathing felt like effort, but none of that mattered. Holding my son erased everything else. I could endure any pain if it meant watching him sleep, listening to his soft breaths, knowing he was safe in my arms. I truly believed I had reached the happiest chapter of my life. What I didn't know then was that the real pain, the kind no medication can touch, had only just begun. This baby wasn't an accident. He was a promise, a dream carefully built over years of trying, hoping, and failing. My husband and I had planned every detail of this life: names, nursery colors, the kind of parents we wanted to be. We had walked through fertility clinics hand in hand, cried through disappointments, and celebrated the day the test finally turned positive. He kissed my belly every night. He promised me forever. I believed him. During the pregnancy, things weren't easy. My body swelled until I barely recognized myself. Doctors warned me about complications. I developed preeclampsia, my blood pressure spiking dangerously. Sleep became a luxury. Pain became normal. Still, I pushed through because I believed love waited on the other side. Labor was long and terrifying. Machines beeped, nurses rushed in and out. I remember gripping the sheets and praying through clenched teeth. When my son finally arrived, crying and alive, I thought the worst was behind me. I didn't notice then that my husband's eyes looked distant. I didn't question why his touch felt hesitant. I was too consumed by relief, too in love with the tiny life placed on my chest. But something shifted after we came home. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me began to pull away. He stayed up late, locked himself in the bathroom with his phone, avoided my gaze. When I asked if something was wrong, he blamed exhaustion, stress, work. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I told myself this was normal, that new fathers get overwhelmed, that love doesn't always look perfect. But my body sensed the truth before my mind was ready to accept it. Something felt off. One night, after finally getting the baby to sleep, I went to take a shower. The steam filled the bathroom, giving me a rare moment of quiet. I stood under the water, trying to wash away the fatigue and the growing heaviness in my chest. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, I noticed the door wasn't fully closed. And then I saw him. He stood there, phone in hand, aimed directly at me. For a split second, neither of us moved. My heart dropped into my stomach. He looked startled, caught, but not ashamed. I grabbed the towel tighter around my body, my skin burning with humiliation. He mumbled something I couldn't quite hear. I didn't even know what to say. I walked past him without a word, my legs shaking. The air between us felt poisonous. My heart pounded as I locked myself in the bedroom, trying to understand what I had just seen. Had he really taken a picture of me without my consent, in my most vulnerable state? When I confronted him, he laughed it off, said he just wanted a photo, something to remember me by since we couldn't be intimate. He spoke as if it were romantic, normal, even sweet. I told him to delete it. He agreed too quickly, scrolling through his phone and showing me an empty screen as proof. But something didn't feel right. That night, I lay beside him staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully. I replayed the moment again and again, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, but the feeling in my chest refused to fade. It wasn't fear exactly, it was instinct, the kind that whispers when something is wrong, even when you wish it weren't. He was in the shower when it happened. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up thinking I would betray his privacy, but as the water ran and steam curled under the bathroom door, my body moved on its own. I picked up his phone from the nightstand. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I knew his passcode, I always had. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, then tapped it in. The phone unlocked. That was the moment my life split in two, before and after knowing. At first, I searched the photo gallery. Nothing. No images. No trace of what I'd seen the night before. My heart pounded harder. Maybe I really had imagined it. Maybe exhaustion had twisted my mind. Then I opened his messages. I didn't even know what I was looking for, just proof that I wasn't losing my sanity. Most of the conversations were harmless, work threads, old group chats. And then I saw one with a name that made my chest tighten. A group chat, a casual name filled with emojis. My fingers hesitated before opening it. I wish I had stopped myself. The screen filled with messages, crude jokes, laughing reactions, and then I saw it. The photo, my photo, taken without my consent. My body, swollen from pregnancy, exposed and vulnerable, sent like a joke, commented on like an object. My vision blurred, my ears rang, I couldn't breathe. There it was, proof that the man I trusted had turned my most fragile moment into entertainment. And then I read the message beneath it, a line that burned itself into my memory, written by him, mocking my body, mocking what I had sacrificed to bring our child into the world. I felt sick. I scrolled further, my hands numb, and then I saw her name, Carly. Not just mentioned, addressed, responding, laughing. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just cruelty, it was betrayal layered upon betrayal. He hadn't only humiliated me, he had shared me. He had offered my body up as entertainment to another woman. I pressed my mouth to keep from screaming. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed, staring at the screen as if it might change. But it didn't. The messages stayed, the proof stayed, the truth stayed. Something inside me broke open, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly and completely. I took screenshots, every message, every image, every timestamp. My hands were steady now, cold and precise. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was documenting, preserving evidence, protecting myself. When I finished, I put the phone back exactly where it had been. Same position, same brightness, same angle. I erased every trace of my intrusion. Then I sat there, staring at the wall, listening to the water still running in the bathroom, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't shocked anymore. I was numb. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, humming like nothing in the world was wrong, I didn't say a word. I watched him move around the room, watched him exist so easily inside his lies. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, our baby between us, listening to his breathing, wondering how someone could be capable of such betrayal and still sleep peacefully. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. The next morning, I woke up different, not broken, focused. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to understand him. I started observing, listening, watching patterns. I memorized his schedule, his tone, the excuses he repeated. I noticed how often he mentioned working late, how his phone never left his side, how he smiled at messages he didn't want me to see. Every detail added another piece to the truth I was assembling in silence. And then one day, without warning, I saw it. A message preview popped up on his phone as it lit up on the counter. "Tomorrow at the usual place. I miss you." From her. That was the moment everything became clear. The man I loved wasn't confused. He wasn't struggling. He was choosing someone else. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not into rage, but into clarity. I knew then that my life was about to change forever.
I didn't confront him right away, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had gone completely still. Once you see the truth clearly, you stop rushing, you stop pleading, you stop needing explanations that were never meant to heal you. I moved through the house like a ghost, quiet and observant, carrying a secret heavier than any words I could have spoken. He went about his day as usual, unaware that I had seen everything. He kissed our baby's forehead before leaving for work, smiled at me like a man with nothing to hide, and walked out the door with the confidence of someone who believed he was in control. I watched him go. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at my hands until they stopped shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made coffee. I fed my son. I changed his diaper and kissed his soft cheek. Life kept moving, even as something inside me had quietly died. That afternoon, while the baby napped, I sat on the couch and replayed everything. Every late night, every meeting, every time he pulled away from me emotionally, physically, mentally. The pieces fit together too perfectly. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a choice, repeated, intentional, and deliberate. And suddenly, clarity replaced pain. I realized I had been mourning the man I thought he was, not the man standing in front of me. When he came home that evening, I was waiting. He looked surprised to see me sitting so calmly at the table. I think he expected tears or yelling or accusations. Instead, I met his eyes without flinching. "How long have you been seeing her?" I asked quietly. The question landed between us like glass shattering. He tried to play dumb at first, laughed nervously, pretended not to understand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply looked at him, unblinking, and waited. That's when he cracked. His shoulders slumped, his jaw tightened, and then, with a sigh that sounded more annoyed than remorseful, he admitted it. He didn't beg. He didn't apologize the way someone who truly regrets their actions would. Instead, he spoke as if explaining an inconvenience, as if his betrayal was something I should rationalize. He said things that still echo in my mind, excuses disguised as honesty, that he felt neglected, that things had changed after the baby, that he needed something different. And then came the sentence that broke something inside me beyond repair. He said he didn't feel attracted to me anymore, not after what pregnancy had done to my body. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I went very still. In that moment, I realized something vital. This man was not confused. He was cruel, and the person standing in front of me was not the man I loved, but someone who had benefited from my vulnerability and resented me for it. I told him to stop talking. My voice was calm, almost eerily so. I told him I had seen everything. The photos, the messages, the jokes at my expense, the way he had shared my body without my consent, the way he laughed with another woman while I healed from childbirth. That was the first time he looked afraid, not guilty, afraid. He tried to backtrack, to explain, to say it meant nothing, that it was just talk, that he still cared. But something inside me had shifted beyond repair. I told him I wanted a divorce. The words felt heavy, but right. He stared at me like I had slapped him, like he never imagined I'd have the strength to say it. He asked if I was serious. I told him I had been more serious in my life. He didn't fight for us, not really. He argued out of pride, not love, and in that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. If I stayed, I would disappear. If I left, I might survive. That night, I packed a bag for myself and my baby. Not much, just the essentials. I didn't cry as I folded the clothes. I felt empty but steady. When I walked out the door, he didn't follow me. That told me everything. I went to my mother's house with nothing but my child, my dignity, and a heart that was breaking quietly in my chest. She didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms, and I fell into them like a child. That was the first night of my old life, and the first night of the woman I would become. The first night at my mother's house felt unreal, like I was borrowing someone else's life. The walls were familiar, but I was different. I lay in the old bed I grew up in, my son asleep beside me, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the distant sound of traffic outside. Everything was quiet, but not peaceful. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the past weeks, the lies looping over and over, until exhaustion finally pulled me under. In the morning, sunlight crept through the curtains, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it hit me at all once. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a single mother with a newborn and a heart that felt scraped raw. The weight of that reality pressed down on my chest, heavy and unavoidable. My mother never pushed me to talk. She simply brought tea, took the baby from my arms when I needed rest, and sat beside me in silence. That quiet support kept me afloat. I didn't have to explain myself. She saw everything in my eyes. The days that followed blurred together. Feeding, changing, pacing the floor in the middle of the night. I cried in the shower where no one could hear me. I cried when I thought about the life I thought I had. I cried when I remembered the version of myself that believed love meant endurance. But even in the middle of that grief, something unexpected happened. I started to feel lighter. Not happy, not hopeful, just lighter. As if a constant pressure had lifted from my chest. The anxiety that once lived in my bones had loosened its grip. I didn't have to watch my words anymore. I didn't have to wonder who he was texting or why he was late. There was a strange peace in knowing the truth, no matter how painful it was. Weeks passed. I stopped checking my phone for his name. I stopped flinching at notifications. My world shrank to simple things. The rhythm of my son's breathing, the warmth of his skin against mine, the smell of clean laundry, the sound of my mother humming while she cooked. Healing didn't arrive in a rush. It came quietly, in small moments. In the way I laughed one day without realizing it. In the way I slept through the night without waking in fear. In the way I started to recognize myself again in the mirror. I began therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand what happened, to understand myself. I learned that love isn't supposed to hurt or humiliate, that wanting loyalty and respect doesn't make you demanding, that walking away is sometimes the bravest form of self-respect. One afternoon, as I folded tiny clothes that already felt too small, I realized something powerful. I wasn't surviving anymore, I was rebuilding. I found strength in routine, morning walks with the stroller, grocery lists, simple meals, quiet evenings where my only responsibility was keeping my child safe and loved. The chaos of my old life had been replaced by a gentler rhythm, and in that rhythm, I found peace. Months passed. I returned to work slowly, cautiously, balancing motherhood and responsibility one day at a time. My confidence came back in fragments, a compliment from a coworker, a task completed well, a moment where I realized I was capable, stronger than I'd ever been. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped wondering if he missed us. It didn't matter anymore. My world had shifted forward, and he was stuck somewhere behind me. One evening, as I watched my son sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Not for what had happened, but for what it had taught me. I had survived heartbreak. I had protected my child. I had chosen myself. And that was the beginning of something new. Time has a strange way of reshaping pain. It doesn't erase it, but it softens the sharpest edges until you can finally breathe without flinching. By the time my son turned 1, I realized I had quietly become someone new. Not stronger in the loud, dramatic way people imagine, but steadier,
Rooted, capable of standing on my own even on the hardest days. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings started early with tiny hands tugging at my hair and sleepy smiles that made every sleepless night worth it. I learned how to juggle bottles, deadlines, and exhaustion with a kind of resilience I never knew I possessed. There were days I felt like I was barely holding it together, but there were also days when I caught my reflection in the mirror and saw strength staring back. I went back to work part-time at first. Walking into the office again felt intimidating, like stepping into a version of myself I wasn't sure still existed. But with every completed task, every small success, my confidence returned. I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding. People began to notice the change. Friends told me I seemed calmer, lighter. I smiled more easily. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. Somewhere along the way, I had learned that survival didn't mean shrinking. It meant growing in ways I never thought possible. There were still hard moments, of course. Nights when exhaustion hit me like a wave. Moments when loneliness crept in quietly and sat beside me. But even then, I never felt empty. I had my son's laughter, my mother's steady presence, and a sense of self that no one could take away again. One afternoon, while picking up my son from daycare, I met someone new. His name was Andre. He was another parent, soft-spoken, kind-eyed, with a calm energy that felt grounding. Our first conversation was nothing special, comments about the weather, about how fast kids grow, but there was something gentle in the way he listened, something unforced. We began to talk more often, slowly, naturally. There were no grand gestures, no intense declarations, just two people exchanging stories while waiting for their children. I never felt rushed or pressured. He respected my space, my pace, my silence. That alone felt revolutionary. Weeks turned into months, and our conversations grew deeper. He asked about my life without prying. He listened without interrupting. When I spoke about my past, he didn't flinch or offer pity. He simply listened, and that meant more to me than he probably realized. One evening, after a school event, he walked me to my car. The air was cool, the parking lot nearly empty. We stood there talking longer than necessary, neither of us eager to leave. When he smiled at me, it wasn't desire or expectation I saw, it was kindness. That was when I knew something had changed inside me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for betrayal. I was simply present. Our relationship grew slowly, intentionally. He never pushed, never rushed. He met my son with patience and warmth, never trying to replace anyone, never demanding a role. Over time, trust formed naturally, the kind built from consistency, not promises. I watched my son laugh with him, comfortable and unafraid, and something in my chest loosened. Healing wasn't a single moment, it was a series of small, quiet victories. There were still hard moments, of course, memories that surfaced unexpectedly, but they no longer defined me. They were chapters, not the whole story. One night, as I tucked my son into bed, he looked up at me and said, "Mommy, you're happy now." I froze, because he was right. I was. Not because my life was perfect, not because everything turned out the way I imagined, but because I had learned to choose myself without guilt. Later that evening, sitting alone in the quiet living room, I reflected on how far I'd come, from the woman who once doubted her worth to the woman who now knew it deeply, from someone who endured love to someone who understood it. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from the past. I had built something stronger, a life rooted in honesty, peace, and self-respect. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. There was a time when I believed happiness arrived all at once, loud, dramatic, undeniable. But what I learned was that real happiness arrives quietly. It settles in when you stop searching for it and start living honestly. By the time my son turned 3, our lives had found a rhythm that felt like home. Mornings were filled with tiny shoes left in the hallway, spilled cereal, and sleepy hugs. Evenings ended with storybooks, soft music, and the comfort of routine. It wasn't perfect, it was real, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. I had stopped measuring my worth through someone else's eyes. I no longer waited for validation or feared abandonment. I had learned to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts instead of silencing them. Andre remained in our lives, not as a rescuer, not as a savior, but as a steady presence. He never rushed anything. He didn't try to replace anyone or fill a role that wasn't his. He simply showed up, consistently, respectfully, and with genuine care. And that, more than anything, taught me what healthy love actually looks like. There were no dramatic declarations, no grand promises, just small, dependable moments. A hand on my back when I felt overwhelmed, a warm meal waiting when I came home tired, quiet laughter after a long day. Love became something safe instead of something I had to survive. One afternoon, as we sat on the floor playing with my son's toy cars, I watched the two of them laugh together. It hit me then how far we'd come. This wasn't a replacement family or a second chance at something broken. It was a new beginning built on honesty and mutual respect. I realized something important in that moment. Healing doesn't erase the past, it reshapes it. The pain I once carried had transformed into wisdom. The fear had turned into boundaries. And the woman who once begged for love had learned to stand firmly in her worth. There were still hard days, of course, triggers that caught me off guard, memories that surfaced unexpectedly, but now I knew how to breathe through them. I knew how to ground myself. I knew that healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing not to live in that place anymore. One evening, after putting my son into bed, I sat alone in the quiet living room and thought about how far I'd come. I remembered the version of myself who felt broken, humiliated, and invisible, and I wish I could reach back through time and tell her this: you survive, you grow, you become stronger than you ever imagined. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from the past. I had built something better from the ashes, a life rooted in self-respect and peace. And as I looked around my home, filled with laughter, warmth, and quiet strength, I understood something deeply. This life didn't happen to me. I built it, one brave decision at a time.